Horror games are known for drawing inspiration from pretty much every form of media, including novels, books, and documentaries. However, getting inspiration from movies is usually a very convenient practice for many developers, because successful horror movies already have the brilliant ideas that people admire. But the issue is that this is a two-edged sword, because people's high expectations can sometimes lead them to huge disappointments when the game is not as equally impressive as the movie. With that being said, there are some exceptions that really succeeded in capturing the essence of movies and made it even better in certain cases. So in this video, I'm going to discuss several horror games that I loved and enjoyed due to their concepts and stories, which were mostly inspired by iconic horror movies that were released many years prior. So without further ado, let's start.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did.
For modern Silent Hill fans, it might be surprising to see Silent Hill 2 included in such a list, because it's not common to hear about the game's source of inspiration. But for the classic fans, it's very well known that Silent Hill 2 was clearly influenced by multiple movies from David Lynch. With that said, there's one specific movie that most people overlook and the younger generation probably never heard of, and it's none other than Eraserhead. This is a surrealist body horror movie that came out 48 years ago in 1977, and it follows Henry Spencer, a quiet, awkward man who lives in a bleak, industrial cityscape full of strange noises and dreamlike decay. Later on, Henry learns that his partner, Mary, has given birth to his child. But the shocking part is that the baby turns out to be deformed and pretty much inhuman. Mary then decides to move in with Henry, but the constant crying of her baby eventually drives her into a breakdown, leading her to leave. Henry finds himself alone, and as a result, he struggles to care for the bizarre, crying baby, which slowly pushes him to lose his grip on reality. He starts experiencing strange hallucinations, including visions of a woman in a radiator who dances and sings about everything being fine. He also imagines his own head falling off and being used to create pencil erasers, suggesting a loss of identity and his inability to recognize himself anymore. But make no mistake, Henry sees all of this because his mind is manifesting his fears and ideas in a nightmarish version of the real world. For example, in the real world, Henry didn't want to have a child at all, and he thinks being a parent can ruin his life. So in the alternate world, he sees the worst version of a child possible, triggering his insecurities by not only experiencing fatherhood, but also dealing with a baby that's disturbing and beyond normal. The same thing applies to the people he sees in his nightmares, like the pretty woman across the hall who's supposed to embody his lust. She's his neighbor, and she's meant to be seductive and nice, trying to invite Henry into an affair shortly after Mary leaves him.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
At this point, she's meant to represent his hidden desires after losing his woman, but later she seems disgusted with him, and this may reflect his guilt over abandoning his child. On the other hand, the lady in the radiator is supposed to be a symbol of escape, death, or peace. She's comforting, strange, and maternal at the same time, and in the end, it turns out that embracing her can mean Henry's surrender or, ultimately, his demise. But what I didn't tell you yet is that Henry deserves this mental suffering because, in a moment of desperation, he sadly killed his own kid, causing a surreal explosion of light and sound, but most importantly, leading himself to an endless cycle of regret and agony. Now that I've given you a quick idea of what Eraserhead is all about, there's no freaking way this disturbing story didn't trigger your Silent Hill memory, especially when you remember James Sunderland. James is a confused husband who received a letter from his wife, inviting him to meet her in Silent Hill Town. The disturbing part, however, is that his wife has been dead for 3 years, but he still gets excited to meet her in the town, hoping that she's really alive. When he arrives in the town, he finds it very nightmarish and oppressive, completely different from the peaceful place he remembers it to be. The fog is all over the place, and there's unbearable silence everywhere without any sign of life. But as James progresses, he starts encountering creepy monsters and meeting bizarre people, including a woman named Maria, who is basically a seductive version of his own wife, Mary. Maria is designed to be beautiful, but also very emotional towards James, representing his hidden intimate desires because he wanted his wife to be like this. The declining health of his wife during her illness put an end to her intimacy with James, and instead, their romance turned into aggression and complaining. This situation led James to consume more alcohol than ever and succumb to his depression, which over time contributed to turning his love for Mary into literal hatred, seeing her as a burden over his shoulders.
James!
Mary?
So this woman, Maria, is actually an imaginary person that only exists in his mind to seduce him and try to fill the void that his wife left, which is incredibly similar to Henry's neighbor in the movie. But the real twist is that James is seeing this brutal version of Silent Hill Town because of his own inner psyche and his psychological struggle, fueled by his regret and guilt. This guilt stems from what he did to his wife, because in case you don't know, James's selfishness, along with his sadness for his wife's health, led to a very tragic decision that he could never forgive himself for. In a moment of despair, James literally smothered his wife with a pillow during her sleep, ending her life, but also ending her misery, which was his main purpose.
I killed her.
Killer? Why'd you do it? I hate you! I want her back. Give her back to me.
The monsters he encounters across the town are manifestations of different traumas inside his head regarding what he did to his wife. Pyramid Head represents his desire for self-punishment, Maria highlights his lust, and other creatures are designed specifically to mean something he fears. If we compare this to the movie, we'll see incredibly obvious similarities. Both Henry and James are average dudes who are in a complicated relationship with a woman. The turning point for Henry is the pregnancy of his partner, which represents a responsibility that he considers a burden. For James, the illness of his wife was the event that triggered his narcissism and refusal to accept any change in their lives. Henry portrays clear selfishness when dealing with his child, reaching a point where he would rather get rid of him than take care of him, which is pretty similar to James's inability to stay beside his wife until the end. Both men try to convince themselves that they did it to end the suffering of their loved ones. But in reality, they also know that their personal desires were the main driving force, and that's why they are drowning in regret.
I know what you are. I know why I needed you.
Henry didn't want the baby to ruin his life because he simply wanted his relationship with Mary to be pure pleasure, while James was annoyed by his wife's disease because it took away her beauty and energy, which were essential in his romantic life. Henry's fear of fatherhood and commitment led him to encounter a deformed baby that symbolizes his anxieties about responsibility, loss of control, and failure. James, on the other hand, was very scared of accepting the reality that he created with his own mistakes. So his mind imagined an entire parallel scenario where his wife is still alive, but his guilt and regret turned his world into a big nightmare for him. And by the way, check out the sounds in Silent Hill Town and Eraserhead, and tell me how these are not similar. I think you get the point, and keep in mind, I'm not saying Silent Hill 2 was directly inspired by Eraserhead, but according to Silent Hill creators themselves, David Lynch movies had a huge influence on this game. And you can obviously understand now how Eraserhead was definitely one of those movies. I intentionally avoided other popular movies because I feel no one is talking about Eraserhead, and most young people don't even know it ever existed.
Hello, Amanda. You remember me? I want to play a game. You told our friendly detective that I saved you. But you forgot your lesson. You damaged your body. With drugs and pain, now the needle will save you.
Saw movies are among the most popular movie franchises in history, without a shadow of a doubt. And even people who never watched them usually still know about their general theme. The main story here centers around John Kramer, also known as Jigsaw, a man with terminal illness who believes people only value life through suffering and pain. This twisted man ends up orchestrating a game in which he targets people he deems ungrateful for life, putting them in deadly traps to test their desire to survive. For example, in the first 2004 movie, we can see two men wake up chained in a grimy bathroom, and their only way to escape is working together within a time limit, or breaking free by using tools like a hacksaw, which is a horrible solution.
I just got electrocuted! Jesus, that was our way out! Did you hear what I said? Get this thing off me!
The genius part is that there's actually a way for both of them to survive, but they can only see it when they trust each other and work together honestly, which is very hard because both guys think the other is lying. Every participant needs to bypass crazy, gruesome challenges to survive. And in certain scenarios, they need to sacrifice something or someone to save their own lives.
Now, turn around. What? Turn around.
However, there's a catch, because if you behave like a douchebag and selfishly leave someone behind for their demise, you can face a trap where you die instead. In other words, we're talking about a man with declining health who is basically dying, but wants to see other people suffer before his own demise because he thinks that they don't deserve to live more than him. This terrifying concept has been adopted very well in the video game, which follows investigator David Tapp after the events of the first film. This guy is obsessed with catching Jigsaw, and as a result, he becomes stuck in an abandoned asylum filled with deadly traps.
What did you do?
Escaping this room will require teamwork. Activating the panel will open both doors. Detective Tapp, you must first find the object in the toilets to unlock the panel. As for the toilet, I've gathered refuse from the obsessions of drug addicts. Now, Detective, dig through others' discarded trash as you forced others to dig through yours.
Jigsaw wants you to navigate the facility, solve puzzles, and save other victims, but you also need to uncover clues about the killer's identity. As you do so, the game introduces new characters, each with their own dark pasts tied to Jigsaw's twisted justice. But they're not all really innocent, if you know what I mean.
Sorry, buddy. This is part of my game. Nothing personal. I'd grab something quick, though, if I was you.
The story in the game masterfully explores themes of survival, redemption, and moral choice as you confront your own demons. Nevertheless, the gameplay mechanics are well crafted and push you to react quickly and think outside the box as if you're inside the movie itself. So, to keep it short, this is truly an amazing example of a video game that knew very well what the movie was all about.
Off me! Take it off! Take it off! Take it off!
Identify yourself.
Captain, it's Carter. Christ, where's everybody?
What happened here?
Something. I don't know what they were, but they attacked us.
The thing might not be very well known among the younger generations, but this movie is also among the iconic ones that have a very special place in the genre. This sci-fi movie came out in 1982, and it's about a research team in Antarctica who end up encountering a shape-shifting alien organism. This mysterious creature assimilates and imitates other life forms, creating paranoia and distrust among the isolated crew because they can't know who might be the alien among them. This means that they are constantly struggling to identify who's normal and who's not, while they battle this entity in a tense fight for survival. If you focus on this concept deep enough, you'll notice that the idea of something taking the shape of others became the source of inspiration for many horror movies and games later on. For example, in Prey, there's an enemy called the Mimic, and these alien creatures can camouflage themselves to look like inanimate objects in their environment, such as chairs or trash cans, which is really confusing. With that said, the movie The Thing had a direct awesome video game made after it in 2002, and this game became even better with a remastered version in 2024. In the game, you play as Captain Blake, leading a squad through 20 levels in Antarctica, but the situation becomes a nightmare when they encounter the shape-shifting alien. The cool mechanic here is something called the Trust-Fear system, which means that your actions can literally influence how much your teammates trust you. For instance, if you give them weapons, they will trust you more, but if you point your gun at them, they will become suspicious of you, thinking you are an imposter. You should also be cautious because sometimes you can meet people who are not really what they seem. You can expect a lot of action, puzzles, and a terrifying atmosphere everywhere, because you don't know if you're really safe with your people or if there's someone suspicious. Besides this game, this idea will also be present in the upcoming Directive 8020 experience, but with more sophisticated details alongside it, including modern visuals and different locations. The Alien movie was first released in 1979, and it quickly became the favorite horror film for many people worldwide, mostly because it introduced a very unique type of alien enemy. The story here is about a crew in a commercial space tug that investigates distress signals on a distant planet, but this bizarre hint eventually leads them to a derelict ship housing mysterious eggs. These eggs end up hatching a hostile creature, which later on evolves into something called xenomorph, and they are very, very predatory and ruthless.
That's a kitty. That's a kitty. Come on, baby. That's a kitty. Hey, I'm not gonna hurt you. Come on.
From this point, the xenomorph starts hunting the crew, killing them one by one in the claustrophobic ship. However, Ellen Ripley emerges as the sole survivor, mainly because she succeeded in outsmarting the creature. And this is exactly why the game behind this movie is insanely challenging and captivating. In Alien Isolation, you play as Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter, who is searching for answers about her mother's disappearance. Subsequently, she was sent to the Sevastopol space station, but she found it in total chaos and overrun by a dangerous xenomorph. What makes the game special is that the aliens here are unbelievably smart, and they know exactly how to find you if you make a simple mistake or if you get too comfortable. I'm not exaggerating, by the way. This game basically has the most intelligent enemies I ever encountered in a horror game, and sometimes it feels impossible to bypass them in certain locations. You need to hide, wait, watch, and make sure that you're not missing their movements, because they literally rely on your psychological missteps. In other words, this experience is a masterclass to test your stealth skills. And it's not for casual players, because if you're new to survival games, you'll have a pain in the butt playing it.
What the hell?
The Evil Within is considered by many people to be a top-tier horror game with the same quality as franchises like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. But what many of you probably don't know is that the main concept of this experience was inspired by the movie Inception. This movie came out in 2010, and it's about a man called Dom Cobb, a skilled thief who infiltrates dreams to steal secrets. And I mean it literally, because he actually has access to people's dreams. Dom and his partner Arthur can do this by using experimental dream-sharing technology that helps them reach the subconscious of certain targets and extract information, which is part of corporate espionage.
You create the world of the dream. We bring the subject into that dream, and they fill it with their subconscious.
How could I ever acquire enough detail to make them think that it's reality?
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right?
Dom was very good at doing this, and he has the genius ability to convince people to feel they're awake, even if they are still dreaming. These capabilities eventually catch the attention of a man called Saito, and as a result, he hires Dom to do the impossible mission, which is planting an idea into a person's mind. This process is called Inception, and the target in question is Robert Fisher, the son of Saito's business competitor Maurice Fisher. And the idea that Saito wants in Robert's mind is dissolving his father's company. In return for this mission, Saito promised Dom to clear his criminal status, which will allow him to go back home to his children and have a normal life again. Now, if you played The Evil Within, there's no way you didn't get the connection, but if you haven't, let me explain it to you. In the game, you play as Sebastian Castellanos, an investigator who was sent to a hospital to investigate a mass murder that occurred in the place. When he starts watching the surveillance tapes, he sees a very disturbing man wearing a white hoodie as he ruthlessly eliminates police officers one by one. After this incident, Sebastian receives a strike from the back, and he then finds himself in a completely different version of the place, which seems way more nightmarish and dangerous. The reason behind this transmission is a man called Ruvik, also known as Ruben Victoriano. And this guy has a very distressing background and complicated history. Since his childhood, he was obsessed with science, to the extent he literally killed his own wealthy parents to seize their money and fund his experiments. The turning point in his life was his sister's death in a fire by locals who were angry at his family, which left him disfigured and very devastated because his sister Laura was his only friend. This pushed him to invent something called the STEM, which is a machine that connects human minds, creating a shared dream world controlled by a central consciousness, mainly Ruvik's. In other words, Ruvik is able to merge the real and the psychological, trapping people in nightmarish realities made by his own psyche. And this is basically why Sebastian is stuck in this bizarre world. Sebastian needs to explore this world to pursue Ruvik, navigating distorted memories and horrors, but the issue is that the system amplifies trauma, meaning that escape is nearly impossible without confronting the core mind. Throughout your playthrough, you will visit different locations that can exist in real life, but they're heavily influenced by Ruvik's twisted mind. And this is why you encounter creepy creatures and mysterious clues. These creatures include a monstrous version of his sister Laura herself, representing his anger and agony towards her demise and his desperation to reunite with her. The game contains a lot of intense action, but the psychological confusion is its best feature because you can never be sure if you're in someone's dream or in reality. The creator Shinji Mikami stated that multiple movies influenced his work in The Evil Within, including Inception and Shutter Island, where the protagonist is lost inside his own mind. But considering the dream system is closer to Inception's style, it's obvious that this movie played a huge role in driving Mikami's creative imagination. Anyway, this is all for today. Please make sure to like this video and let me know in the comments below if there are any good horror games that you want me to mention in an upcoming video about movie inspirations. See you next time.
Mary?